All right, let's write it up a bit more. So I was just looking up on the links conception. So it's right. The third number in the ls output refers to the number of links, and that's generally the link to the own. So it refers to links to directories. That is generally the own directory you're in and the parent directory as well. So yeah, if you're a directory, you generally have at least 2 links. If it's a file, you generally only have 1 link because you're referring to the current directory. So the relationship between the directories is kind of re-established using this link conception. I don't, so, and since you always have 2 by default, you can see already that if you have 2 links in the ls output, it means you don't have a subfolder. If you have, for example, 3, you can expect to have it 1 subfolder. If it's 6, you would expect it to have 4 subfolders, for example, a given directory. You know?
Yeah, I checked that it has hard links within the directory, so the amount of hard links on the computer that points to
that directory, right?
Yeah, to inside that directory.
So Yuna was pointing to hard links. The idea is that files can, instead of being okay, it's a bit more like file system kind of idea. So in Linux, we have the concept of hard links. We don't have that in Windows, and you're discouraged from using it. So what is it? Well, instead of having a file as a dedicated, well, instead of just having a file in the file system that is uniquely identified by the operating system, Linux is kind of clever in terms of efficiency. You could have, for example, 2 file system representation pointing to the same block in the actual file system, how it's stored, right? So if you guys know how hard drives work, but I don't want to push that too far. Since you opened that Pandora's box, so now you're in the middle of it. So on the one hand, we have the blocks on the file system, right? So it's a hard drive, for example, here. And then we have the actual file system that the user sees. And that's generally a list of files, right? File 1, file 2, file 3, and so on. And this is what you're dealing with, right? You generally open files, you're modifying and going to different directories. What they internally do, however, they of course point to some references on the hard drive itself. And the neat part, or the specific part in Linux or in Unix system, what you can do is actually that you have 2 different files that point to the same content. So one file can lie totally elsewhere on the file system, but actually point to the exact same content of a file, have even a different name, like being packed to the same file. And as soon as both files, the hard links, are actually deleted, for example, then this content is also deleted automatically, right? So if only one of them is deleted, the content is retained. So it's a very different concept. Usually in Linux, we're used to having a one-to-one relationship where each file points uniquely to one thing. But what you allow in Windows though is to have soft links, that is pointers from files to files in the file system. Right? You have a shortcut on Windows on the desktop, and if you double-click this, it starts some extra file with us. That is a reference, a soft link within the file system, within the file system directory basically. But it actually doesn't relate back to doesn't point to actual blocks on the hard drive. So that's the difference there. I don't think we need to go deep in this unless you're terribly keen, but that's the Linux conception there. So we have soft links, what you know from Windows, hard links, what's happening underneath, and that's what you see there. That's the number there. How many hard links do you have in the from file system to hard drive? So, okay. Having cleaned up that one, one other thing I want to show you, well, something that's kind of we need to. I think I think we would feel a bit uneasy having you leaving this course without knowing this bit. And one of the tools you probably come across is Vim. Vim improved, and that's a fairly dated tool, in fact. When was it developed? Anyone? Okay. Anyone else?
1991.
Okay. And when was VI developed?
1976.
There you go. 1976. Okay. So it's roughly before everyone was born here in this room, right? Roughly? One exception? Okay. Yeah, so the point is, why do we talk about those tools, right? So why do we talk about tools that are 40 years old?
when you're working with servers, VI is you're only guaranteed to have VI when you log in. You're not guaranteed to have Vim or Nano, for example.
Exactly, right? So we have the convenience of, especially in university courses, to pick our tools, right? We set up our environments, we pick our, we gave you 1 week to figure out the favorite distribution you want to run and actually set it up. If you're in an existing environment, you don't have that choice, right? You may end up for example, in Unix System 5 environment, or you may actually end up on a FreeBSD or NetBSD, and you can't just change the operating system because you don't like it. You kind of need to work with this, and it's there, right? So your point?
What was between 69 and 76 for the iPhone?
Yeah.
There had to be.
That's a good one. I think VI was there already. I don't think it's the first. Was it the first release of VI in '76?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Probably worthwhile. Good research. You can do a talk on that one. So worthwhile figuring out. But that's a good one. But in any case, '76 still quite some time ago, I guess. But the point is, your point is exactly right. Sometimes you don't have the luxury to choose the system you're working on. You're just you need to work on a system that exists. So the point is, VI, of course, now in Vim, VI improved. That's the one. That's what you most likely find in modern distributions. Is a refined version of the same thing. But the idea is there. There was a time when there was no mouse. So you need to be able, for example, to edit a file without any mouse support, so you don't have the fancy GUIs you have. The GUI conception was also much simpler. You also didn't have a keypad, the right thing on the right side with numbers and stuff like that. So you need to work around this. There was no arrow keys at that time, so you just dealt with the keyboard. So everything was mapped to some keyboard keys, so it became a bit complicated. But most interestingly, in VI, since you can do everything or do everything on the keyboard largely, it has become quite popular even modern times for developers due to, first of all, its extensibility, but secondly, you can be reasonably efficient once you get comfortable with this. And some people may have preferences towards this tool, and the rest may not. And that is usually a disjunct group. Either you love it or you hate it. So it's very clear-cut differentiation. Your own experience there, or any?
I prefer them over for 7 Nano. It's a lot easier to navigate and do things quickly.
Yeah.
Than just normal Nano.
Yeah. So that's one position you'll see. And you'll see the power in a second. Talk about some commands there. What we expect in the course is that basically not much, but other than knowing this tool. And if you're entering, for example, a system and you suddenly need to be able to actually exit a file, modify a file, you should be able to do that Vim somewhat comfortably. That's the key idea there, right? So in fact, in past years, that was in a previous life, I had my students actually write an exam in Vim, so that was a good outcome. So afterwards, they were really good at that, but they hated me, so I stopped doing it. Not a good idea. So we shall not do it in this course. That course is not an operating system course, we are at the cloud course, but it's still important to get it right. So, so just to use VI, usually, hang on. The modern modern VI command is generally always linked back to Vim. So even of course you can have the original VI wherever it's installed, it generally starts the VI improved, the refined one. And the reason is that Vim improved has support for arrow keys, things like that, so luxury that we know from nowadays, and a lot richer command set that you can actually exploit. But just for the sake of exercise here, I'll open a file, and that's basically a file that exists as in a default directory, in a home directory in Ubuntu, just for the sake of it. But so how do you open this? Well, it's quite straightforward. You say VI and then a file of choice. And there you are, right? So, but when you just naively start typing, you'll see nothing much is happening. Well, actually something happened here, so that's the risk that you do. And the reason is that VI recognizes, I think, 4 different modes, right? So you can work in. On the one hand, you have the start mode, which you basically just see and see basically the content of the file. But in order to decide what you actually want to do, you need to switch between different so-called modes. One of them is the insert mode, the other one is the append mode, the third one is the visual mode, and this one is the normal mode. So what's the difference between those? Well, the normal mode is made just for entering commands, right? So you're not expected to do anything particular in terms of editing the file content directly, like you're used to in Nano, Pico, Notepad, whatever you guys use, gedit. But actually, the idea here is that you just need to decide what's going to happen with this file and what am I going to do. Then there's a insert mode. That's the one you're used to. Usually, your editor, when you start Nano, you're kind of in an insert mode. Basically, you can do anything to the content immediately. The visual mode, is also a different concept because you can actually select aspects of the file. So when you get in, you're always navigating between 4 different modes. And the safest way to be ensuring that you're starting from the normal mode, because it's not always easy to switch between modes, is to press escape. This way you know you're back in normal mode. And when you press colon, you see at the bottom, well, some of you may see, hang on, I'll get a magnifier. You will see that there is a column appearing, and that actually gives you, means, okay, now it's the time to actually enter commands, right? So in the most common command, of course, that you need to know, that's at least the only command you need to remember is :Q, and Q stands for quit, if you want to get out of this thing, right? At least you do it without destroying the file. So, right, but of course we not want to do those boring things. We actually want to modify stuff. So in order to change to a different mode, the insert mode, for example, you press I. Right, and now you see in the bottom left here, it writes insert. You're now in the insert mode, and at this stage you can do nearly stuff that you do every day, right? Just type stuff and it changes actual content. If you regret what you did, you can just press escape, go back to normal mode, and press U, which would undo whatever you did just before. Right, so you're relatively quick in changing things. The other one is the replace mode. That means, well, this is actually overwrite mode. Instead of inserting stuff, you're overwriting whatever is there. Right, so it will totally disregard previous content and just override it bluntly. That's the replace mode. Lower left replace and activate it with an R. And finally, you have the visual mode, which is basically meant for selection. So if you enter this mode, you're able to select by column. Another nice feat is also be able to select in visual blocks, so you're no longer bound to just selecting in terms of full complete rows, but you can actually just select from a given column you're in onwards. So you can activate this with the visual block command, that's Control-V. Of course, don't worry about the commands right now. We get there, how you get to deal with those ones. What else can you do? Well, you can, of course, do copying and pasting. So you are in normal mode, and you press the so-called yanking, and then you choose a location of choice, for example, the end, and then E, that's pasting, so yanking and pasting. So those are a few commands, and just to give you more confidence that I'm not just using weird commands, let me show you a bit of a cheat sheet to make life easier, because we have, of course, developed such thing where we think those are the most common commands you want to use. So basic principle, and it also reminds me to talk about everything I want to talk about. Basic principle is VI, file name opens file. If file doesn't exist, it will create the file. Right? So it will actually, open a new file, and then when you save it, it's actually created. The top commands are the more general ones from outside, basically from the operating system perspective. So if you want to open a file that you want to recover, because what VI does in the background as well is actually it buffers the file you have been working on. So actually, I think it's created as a hidden file, right? So .svp, that's right, exactly. And it will, that's quite cool because you can actually recover a crashed session as well. So it's built-in feature as well. So you do that with -R if you want to recover a file of choice. If you want to, for example, enter a file, and that's where your efficiency, productivity comes in. Open a file, you would just immediately be at the end of a file and continue typing. You can open it with V plus and the plus symbol, so quite straightforward. Or if you want to, for example, place a cursor on a given file or a given line name, you can also do that immediately at the starting point and so on. So it's quite powerful in that respect. But coming back to the 4 different modes here, how do you navigate them? Well, escape always brings you back to normal mode. That's the starting mode, and that's the sensible move to actually get going. And then you press I to get into insert mode, meaning where you add stuff. R into replace mode, where you just overwrite anything that's existing there at the position of your cursor.
Don't see capital R.
Sorry?
Don't see capital R. It's not a lowercase R.
Ah, yes, yes. That's the capital R. Yes, that's right. This cheat sheet here is linked to you, so it's accessible to you at any time. You can also use it, for assignment or whatever else. We'll not ask those questions in exam, so you don't need an exam. Yeah, you definitely don't. But nevertheless, it's probably worthwhile having around. So if you for basic navigation purposes, yes, capital R. And then the visual mode is the one I showed last. That is basically just selecting stuff. You press V, you're in this mode afterwards. So right. So now we know how to get into the system. We know how to navigate between the different modes for a bit, but also how to get out of it safely. And that's like super important. And if there's one command you need to know, it's kind of the last one. And that's if you're in normal mode, you just press :Q exclamation mark and just says, leave this file at any cost and don't save any changes, right? So if you entered a file, you did some changes, you regret everything you did, not your life, just in the file. You just press escape, :Q exclamation mark, and you're safe again, right? It will happen to some of you that you actually get stuff in this thing. So remember, that's the so-called panic command. So if you are in a file, you actually want to write and change, store the changes, you need to use :W. It says, stay in the file, but save whatever has been done up to as of now. If you, of course, want to quit immediately as well, you combine both, right? You say :write and quit at the same time. So you can do those things. What else is important here? Yes. So in some cases where the file is marked as read only, you can still enforce the overwriting by using the exclamation mark. But that's a rare case. I wouldn't recommend those cases. Please. So it depends. That's right. That's a good point. Pardon? Yeah, that's right. The question was there. Okay, how does it work? How does the system actually get the permission to write, even if the file is only read only? In certain conditions, it can simply override the permission system, but not under all. So I wouldn't rely on it working properly in all environments. Have you used that extensively? The overwriting permissions?
No, I usually see those.
Yeah, so that's my usual go-to as well. I usually, if there's a file which I know I don't want to deal with permissions, I open it with sudo vi. But I know environments where it's not allowed to actually change the access control in vi, but in some cases it allows you to do so. So, but it's more like the general case. You probably need to try it and see how it works. But
There's another cheat sheet where it says you can write out as C.
so again.
You can write out as C. If you're in a file that needs to write,
Yeah.
you can write out. If you open a file that you can write out as
Right.
instead of now.
There's of course there's heaps. I mean, if you type cheat sheet VI, you find heaps of them because they're for different angles, right? If you're a developer, if you're an admin, whatever else. That's right. You can even from VI change, access the command line and change system properties as well. So, but that's slightly beyond the scope. But yes, sure, you can share that as well. Just put it on, the issue checker, for example, or whatever else. Here, the idea is to have a minimal cheat sheet. That's really one pager, so not everyone. You don't want to push it too far. All right. So if you're in a given mode, right, you want to be able to navigate. Of course, if you want to move between different lines and columns, along the lines and so on, you can use the arrow keys, or in a normal mode, so that is the mode where you press escape in the beginning and don't expect to change anything. We can actually use H, J, K, and L. Those were the traditional ways of navigating on the keyboard in VI, if you want to go up, left, right, and so on. They all still work, but that's more historical. I think the arrows are probably more intuitive in terms of moving. If you want to move to the end of a file, beginning of a file, you can use the little, the kind of, what is it? How do you call that? Roof symbol. How do you call this properly? What's the proper name for the roof symbol thing? That's proper. Yeah, but you're right, the head symbol thing. Timed out already. Hang on, let's see if I get to get in this. That one here. Good. Normal mode, head symbol. Where's my head symbol? I have a head symbol. There's my head symbol. I'm at the beginning of the file. If I want to be at the end of a file, I use the there you go. Alt-R and then the dollar symbol to get to it. Yeah, my setup is a bit wonky, it seems. But you can also easily navigate to the end of the file. Shift G, you want to be, that's right, the end of the file, that's right. The end of the line is dollar. What else?
Beginning of the line 0, jump to the end of the word is B.
Yes, that's right, good.
Beginning of the word is W.
W, that's right.
Not beginning, I mean B.
Yeah,
the next word is W.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
want to jump 10 lines up, 10 and then 10.
So if you are very comfortable, you can combine them very effectively, right? So that's exactly the use case. So if you want to develop in VI, it's definitely sensible to acquaint you with the compound commands, where you can do those things. DD, yes, true. Good, we get to that. One that I really like is setting line numbers as well. So you can in normal mode say set NU, so you actually get to see line numbers. Quite helpful sometimes if you want to, for example, refer in your team to a specific line number. You know, at least you have the line number ready. But your point is pretty good. How do we delete stuff? Well, it's simply in normal mode DD, suck, and it's gone, right? Again, if you want to undo it, simply U. So it's very powerful. And it doesn't store anything of that until you actually store the file in the end, right? Please.
So the W explanation command. If you do it on a file, you don't have permission.
Yeah.
But you're changing to your home directory. Because you can't overwrite the current file you're working
Right.
with. You don't have permission.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
You don't have, right?
Cool.
So then you have to go back to sudo again.
Sudo, yeah, it's also good sudo. Okay, painful. So sudo is the way to go. Okay, cool. Thanks for the clarification. What other command do we need to know? So if you want to, for example, delete a line right from the cursor, the yanking concept, as I mentioned, so Y is yanking, copy basically, and P is paste, right? So copy from the current location, go to target location, paste. If you want to search something, slash and then a pattern of choice. So that's perhaps a good one to know. So it would bit you to the would bring you to the next occurrence of NA for AZ, for example, if you're looking for that particular string sequence. So that's what would be one of the. We do that later.
If you do the handle and there are multiple lines for all multiple lines for the same word or the same sentence,
Again, repeat that.
especially when you do the pattern, then
Searching, yeah.
if you do a word that just appears multiple times, all highlights.
Don't know. You basically just navigate between the first one, so you would go to the next occurrence of the pattern. So let's try it. We went to the first so there's the first line with the AZ, and then it doesn't seem to highlight it, but it jumps between if you press N, so that would point you to the next, bring you to the next location.
Vim is highlighting.
Sorry?
Vim is highlighting.
Vim is highlighting it, okay. So yeah, this whole color highlighting is of course a bit more. But yeah, but that's the idea there. Then you change the file because it's not my file. So that's the idea, right? So you slash and search for pattern, for example, and then just navigate between previous and next occurrence of the pattern. You can replace stuff using the this command, basically, foo and bar, where you substitute one for the other. And the last thing was basically the control V. That was the block selection. If that's of meaning to you, how you can approach that. It's basically just using control V, and then it allows you to select visual blocks basically. So that's the idea. Okay. You can. Say yanked right now. So it says block of 6 lines has been yanked. Then I'm going to target location P, for example, and press P here, and so it's really powerful for different forms of selections and directions there. But also the jumps between, for example, like 10 lines up or things like that. It's quite really powerful. But you need to like it. It's really like it or hate it. And in either case, you need to learn a lot in terms of commands, right? So it's even for those relatively simple interactions that we just did, you need to have kind of a page long of different shortcuts you want to be comfortable with. But again, it's really about sometimes you're in an environment you don't have the luxury to control. And in this case, you still need to be able to navigate at least in Vim, and that's the time where you want something like that. Anyways, it's linked here somewhere. We have cheat sheet, so if you need this, you can use that. If you have suggestions for your revisions, extensions, whatever else, feel free to modify it directly or raise an issue and I'll introduce those changes. So VI is a tool that you want to bear in mind. Of course, you guys know Nano and Pico and so on, whatever else, right? Nano is a relatively straightforward editor. I think there's no need to lose any words on those ones. They are kind of as you are. The only difference is there that you that the control that you're doing down here is you're basically using the control commands down here. So instead of having a dedicated normal mode with the columns or whatever else, at any time you can exert control by using the control key. So control X for exiting, control B for back and forward, and so on. So I don't think that's worthwhile exploring too much. Okay. Right. Good. So I think that covers the VI bit. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about? Is there anything else I should mention? Any of you guys, the Linux people amongst you? Amongst you? So how much time do you have? 15 minutes, isn't it? All right. Perhaps one aspect, I had some questions regarding this. We talked a bit about apt and apt-get, right? So in Linux, and before forgetting all about this, I just wanted to say about the different pathways of how you can actually install stuff on Linux and Windows. You generally download your setup Excel, run this thing, and then if you're lucky, you have a running software on your system, right? But fundamentally, you need to figure it out yourself. You need to download it yourself. Traditionally, Linux is quite different in a way. You recall that the whole motivation underlies an open source approach, right? So that you ideally should use software and build it from source yourself before running it. But it's also due to the fact that the original Unix systems usually had very platform-specific software that needed to be compiled from scratch anyway. This is, of course, not really very handy for the everyday user. What would generally be, if you see something from that's to be downloaded from source, you would see something like this. You get some sort of tarball file, tar.gz. You download this thing. You run the configure script in there that usually asks you to parameterize, for example, which directory you want to store the compiled files in, where's your user directory, and things like that. It produces a so-called make file as an output. Then you run make, which is the actual compilation, and then make install, which actually puts it where you want it to be. So, I mean, you actually install it in your system. Generally, no uninstall script involved. So once it's installed, and then good luck from there. But of course, that's not super handy. We're not doing this. It's incredibly generic and makes it, of course, flexible for different platforms, which was historically an important point. But nowadays, it's, of course, a bit involved, especially updates. Dealing with uninstall is a bit tricky. So last session, or the beginning session, we talked a bit about different file packaging formats that exist. So RPM with the corresponding package manager YAM, for example. So to install, you know, in this case, Red Hat packages. Debian with the .deb format. Sometimes you can download .deb files manually and install them. They will open in the software package manager that you have in the GUI, for example, but in on the command line you would install them using a tool called dpackage. But fundamentally, the idea is that you use APT for this purpose and so on. So for different distributions, different solutions. So that's the idea. The idea there is that your software is kind of pre-packaged. You don't need to deal with this yourself. You don't need to figure out the locations because there are well-known locations for software, for example, in Debian or Ubuntu, and the user locations are well specified and things like this, where you're supposed to actually store files. And they resolve dependencies as well. So actually, if you have a software that depends on a particular version of Python, the system will automatically download that version of Python as well and install it. That wouldn't be the case in the source in the compilation by hand approach. So that's been generally the idea of those package managers, how they work. And fundamentally, that was coming back to the main question that I got, the principles of software installation on Linux. Well, generally, when you are on the user side, you actually just run apt-get or apt-install and things like that. What does the system do? Well, it actually goes to the repository, software repository of your vendor. In this case, the generative provider of your Linux distributions. In the Ubuntu case, that would be Canonical, so a software company. And they actually maintain a repository of all third-party software that is supported in Ubuntu and so on, and tested in their repository. And basically what your system does is to sync with the repository and then install the files as specified there. Basically download them from there. Same for RPM packages, always the same principle. But the key thing there, in contrast to Windows, is you're not directly going to the vendor itself, you're going to your provider for your Linux distribution, which have a pre-packaged version of your particular software that you need. Good or bad? Is there a good approach or bad approach? Use? Stable, that's a good point, yes. It kind of always works, right? So if you want to install software and you want to know it works, what's the downside of it? It's so stable and so amazing.
Don't get the latest packages necessarily.
Yeah.
And if you can average something in the package in the package file like UL, maintain them to the requirements which take a copy every
Yeah, that's correct. So one of the things that's a major downside is actually, you know, testing, quality assurance, and you know, regression testing and so on take time, and it also takes time to actually update the entire repository because the repositories correspond generally to the latest or to the corresponding distribution version. So it needs to be tested against the entire distribution, ideally in all possible combinations. How realistic that is, okay. But the point is, it usually takes ages for software, so the latest software, to enter those repositories. So in many cases, also in this course, you'll find that the software that you install using those repositories is kind of outdated. So we kind of bypass this at times and ask you to directly run those 5 commands and hope it works. And what that does is usually directly downloading, for example, binaries and installing them for you without the compilation step, of course. But this is one significant downside of those systems. But if you generally just want to install something briefly and quickly, use apt or apt-get, apt being the more modern version of it, because it has a bit more fancy UI and progress bar and things like that, to install software if you can. The advantage there you get is that it's managed. And that means both that it's definitely working on your system, but it also means that it's definitely updated on your system if an update comes, right? Because the system will also, if you run apt-get update or update, it will just download this latest signatures from the repository. And when you then run upgrade, so it will tell, it will tell you afterwards how many packages in your system can be upgraded potentially. But just you need to run a super user though. You run update, which I'm doing right now. It does that. It syncs with the registered repository. You can of course also amend those URLs if you wanted to, but generally that's managed by distro. And it basically just checks what are the latest packages available and tells you at the end how many of those can actually be updated. And it takes a bit. There we go. And it says, oh well, in my system 413 packages can be upgraded. I will not do this, but what you can do is basically show the list of upgraded packages, or if you want to run this, of course, run apt upgrade, which I'm not doing now because it will be taken out. Yeah, please.
There is one that doesn't have a reference file, doesn't have secure, doesn't update automatically.
You need to elaborate. I don't. Yeah, that's right. So one of the concerns is, of course, okay, what happens if somebody hacks the URL, right? So when you download the repositories from a third or fourth party and actually potentially inject potentially malware into your system. How do you ensure that you actually get the right repository from the right vendor, right? Especially since you can expand. So what you generally need to do is to pre-register the keys. So the server-side signature keys in locally as well. So you need to register them, and then the system will only allow you to download. That's what you're referring to. Only allow you to download from those sources that are recognized. I'm just checking. So, so if you're going to Etsy, there's no point following this, but the point is /Etsy/apt, that's where the apt tool is managed, the advanced packaging tool. And there's a file called sources.list. If you go into that file, you see a set of dev URLs. Those are URLs that are inquired or queried with respect to the repository. So that's where actually lookup happens. Worthwhile knowing because sometimes they may be abandoned. So, or if you're moving countries, you may preferably change to different URLs for efficiency reasons, so you can use the local URLs. But you always need to register the signature for those URLs in advance before actually the system will download from there. It's usually part of the description. I don't know the command by heart right now, but you will need to add the package signature using apt manually. In fact, we did this last night. We'll do it again when we install recent third-party tools with third-party handlers, where the repositories don't go to canonical back, but actually go to the third-party providers directly. So the only way is actually get the signature, the pass phrase basically, and register them with the Ubuntu system in order to go app download it.
Now you could set a switch that allows
yeah, but let's not call that best practice. Yes, yeah, let's avoid this one, of course. Cool. I think it should be enough for now. So you guys know apt, of course, is a tool. There's apt-get as a tool. There's also aptitude, which is a GUI-based tool, which is not installed here right now. It's kind of a medieval one. And there's, of course, the software manager that you have most likely seen that pops up if you say, do you want to install this update? You may have seen this fellow here, Synaptic sometimes. I'm not sure if it's still the name, but some package manager to allow you to do this. So far, so good. And it allows you also to review the versions of the packages you have installed in your system. Okay, I'll leave it at this. Thanks for your attention and thanks for bearing with me again. Hopefully next session, yeah, I don't know. Perhaps Go, perhaps me again. Not that stuff again, but we'll see. Because Go is of course necessary because we need to think about slowly having you do your first assignment. On another mini note, I'll come back to that. Please have a look. I raised an issue a week ago or something like this. It was about room preferences. You guys are in the second year and you have experience with room A255, that's this one here, and A254, that one there. It's a small survey. We want you guys to indicate your preferences about the rooms and what we could change to make them better. And then we can discuss it a bit and then inject this back into our planning discussions because we're thinking about revising those rooms. Please check the URL in the issue tracker in this for the GitLab project and answer if you can. So around 20 people have done so already, so thank you very much. But if you want to have your input, that's the opportunity.